China and Russia forced the hand of Donald Trump by using Bitcoin. Shortly after, VanEck confirmed that China and Russia is using Bitcoin for international trade. Trump paused the tariffs. But I'm going to dive in today why this $245 billion move can unlock a $330 trillion market for Bitcoin. So, of course, what is making waves across the internet and across Twitter is what Van Eck and Matthew Siegel uncovered with the trading between China and Russia. So the impact of Donald Trump's tariff package targeting imports from China and the EU has now gotten global tensions in there. And the interest is no longer theoretical. China and Russia have reportedly begun settling some energy transactions in Bitcoin and other digital assets, while Bolivia has announced plans to import electricity using crypto. The French, the list goes on, folks. We're seeing the game theory of Bitcoin play out well in full, all because of Donald Trump's tariffs. Now, this is unique because before we were saying, hey, we need the SBR, we need these nation states to adopt Bitcoin. But really, did we just need Donald Trump to put in these tariffs in order to pump our Bitcoin bags? Now, I will be getting into why this move could be monumental and even bigger than we think later on in this video. But first, we've got to talk about how important these trade wars essentially are. In fact, this might have attempted to end the trade war, right? People were talking like Donald Trump in the US had lost the trade war with these tariffs. The Deutsche Bank came out and said that investors are losing confidence in American goods, where now we're seeing the game theory fully play out. Before, we had rumors that Russia was using cryptocurrency to avoid sanctions. In fact, there was rumors not too long ago. And like I say all the time, folks, when there's smoke, there is fire, especially in the Bitcoin space. So this is from earlier this year, March 13th, just about a month ago, how Russia had been leaning on cryptocurrencies for oil trade. Now, there was rumors back when Biden and others put on these sanctions on Russian oil that they were doing this even last year. So this is nothing new. And it seems like Russia has been really looking and potentially dictating a lot of this market, utilizing Bitcoin and other rails in order to conduct trade. And it seems like now them and China have completely opened this. But why is this significant? Well, let's look at the facts here, folks. Trade between Russia and China hit a record high last year. Now, what do they say? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And it looks like Russia and China have become allies at this point, right? There's rumors of them, with the BRICS and everything else. Even though these two power-hungry nations, they're now potentially working together, all against Donnie T and the Orange Man himself, right? So these trade was a record high of last year. The volume is where I started this with $245 billion. So this trade volume could be potentially 245 billion, all being transacted over Bitcoin. Now, we're not saying that every single transaction is doing this and that this is going to be the case, but it seems like it is trending in this direction. Now, we're talking about a lot of different aspects with Bitcoin, but the biggest movement of money on a day-to-day basis, a yearly basis, monthly basis, just the biggest movement changing hands is always global trade. The 2024 global trade reached $33 trillion, driven by a 3.7 increase. Now, this is led by a 9% annual growth in services and goods. And it seems like the global trade market is going to potentially increase in value specifically because of the tariffs. So if the United States is looking to now increase these tariffs all over the place, everything's going to be more expensive. There's going to be more dollars transacted back and forth. Now, I get it. Donald Trump just put a 90-day halt on these tariffs. Now, why did he do that? Because it shot waves through the market. We saw Bitcoin go crashing down. We saw everything go crashing down. And then now, after Donald Trump announced that he is pausing these tariffs, everything's shooting back up. And now everybody's happy. So, did this move by Russia and China by transacting in Bitcoin, essentially moving away from the US dollar, is that the move that forced Donald Trump to now halt these tariffs? Look, we're going to keep diving into this story as we get further along in this video. And I'm going to put on my cool little Ray-Bans here. They're not necessarily Ray-Bans. I don't know why I'm calling that. My cool aviators that are actually blue light blockers so I can sleep like a baby tonight, folks. But either way, the global trade market is absolutely massive. But this is not the first time we've seen nations try to move away from the US dollar. In fact, we've got China and Russia potentially moving into a crypto market with the BRICS coin, BRICS Pay, their international trade system. They've been trying to further this cryptocurrency market, so to speak, by creating their own token so they can conduct international trade utilizing crypto. So it's obvious that China and Russia see the value in utilizing Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Now but the difference is they want to control their blockchain. Well, what is something that nobody can control, right? It is Bitcoin. So theoretically, if the BRICS nations created this cryptocurrency and the US had some great hackers and wanted to hack this system, they could and potentially try to halt this. So maybe the control is not what they would like if currently China and Russia are not the world power leaders. So I think that they're considering all aspects and where everything could potentially go here. But I think it is huge that we've seen this now and we've seen this developing over time, right, folks? I'm highlighting the date here, October 18th, 2024. At the BRICS summit, they were looking at this. The U.S. decisions to weaponize the dollar and seize Russia's assets, previously considered to be a I don't even know this word. I'm not even going to try it. That's embarrassing. But its clash with Russia has been unsettled, and central banks around the world, they've been trying to de-dollarize, right? A lot of these people have been looking at the U.S. and saying they're getting too power hungry with all of this, right? But it's interesting because we've got a lot going on in the market just in these past few days, to say the very least. So with that, we had the BRICS continue to develop this, their game-changing blockchain system. Right? We got TF in the chat asking, why would any nation join currency China and Russia they can control? Well, that is a great question because China and Russia are a part of the BRICS nations. So are you going to be allies with the United States or are you going to be allies with the BRICS? If the U.S., in fact, ruffles too many feathers, if the U.S. starts to analyze and really screw some people over, if the U.S. does a lot of different things, right? The U.S. potentially issues more stimulus. If the U.S. continues and conducts more QE, so to speak, right? Some quantitative easing, the potential money printer. If all of these things happen, who benefits, right? It's just the U.S. If you look at countries that are dollarized, which is a lot of the world, if they do not print, or if the U.S. prints, they see no real benefit. So nations like Japan, China, Russia, all these others, when the US dollar weakens, they have to hope that their currency strengthens relative to that. But at the end of the day, everybody wants to trade and wants to hold US dollars. Well, if the US pisses enough people off by printing a bunch of money and essentially, you know, inflating its currency away into the oblivion, people will want to use something that the China and Russia will do. And in fact, if China and Russia is like, hey, we are not going to accept any payments in the US dollar, we're strictly just going to use the BRICS currency, the BRICS pay, then hey, then the people that need China and Russia's exports in order to survive and keep the country thriving, well, they're going to do it, right? They're going to hold the hand of China and Russia. And China and Russia have been utilizing this Bitcoin and others to avoid sanctions. They've started doing that already, right? So they started doing that, like I pointed out, under the Biden administration. And we'll get into how significant that is shortly after we talk about my wonderful sponsors and how we will give you guys some free sats, because we're not going to give you guys the BRICS pay. We're going to give you guys real Bitcoin. Okay. So I did a video yesterday about the potential of Coinbase and BlackRock issuing that paper Bitcoin. But there's 130 of you, 130 plus of you in here. So get your Lightning wallets ready, because we've got some wishing well tokens ready to give you some free Bitcoin here simply for joining these streams. So if you guys have not hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you guys know when I'm going live. Do that right now so you guys can always tune in and watch the live streams as they're actually happening. But we'll get this wishing well token going in, and boom, we got another 210 sats for you. So hopefully you guys scoop up this this Bitcoin here. I'm giving you guys free sats day in and day out when I bring you these different live streams. But what I think the true power of Bitcoin is actually holding it yourself and being able to self-custody. It's really, truly freedom technology. Right? Russia and China are utilizing Bitcoin in order to avoid sanctions. Well, you can utilize Bitcoin to avoid using banks, potentially avoid getting your bank account seized and other things as well. So, you could store your generational wealth in the only place where there is zero counterparty risk. And Bitcoin Well makes it super easy. You could go to bitcoinwell.com/green-candle, sign up today, and you can get some wishing well tokens of your own. And if you're looking for an easy solution in order to store that, you could go to bitbox.swiss/green-candle. You could go to right here and get that Bitcoin only edition, as I really recommend. Get that Bitcoin only edition. And then from there, you can get your punch plates all there. You can get the hammer and the toolkit, everything you need. Use promo code Green Candle. You'll get 5% off of your entire order, because I don't know about you guys, but I am seeing the writing on the wall, as is China and Russia. The trade wars, right? We're going back and forth, as we got people in the chat saying down under the blues, bing bong, bing bong. The trade wars are going on. Look at that, man. I can rhyme. Kid's got some talent back here behind the microphone. So let me spit real quick to you guys out here. But we are seeing a massive geopolitical event, and they're fleeing to Bitcoin for safety. Now, this is something that should not be underestimated, right? I mean, like I said, like the title says, right? $245 billion worth of United States dollars was used back and forth to trade just between China and Russia last year. So if international trade starts to spike and people start to utilize Bitcoin for international trade, well, game theory is playing out here, folks. Congratulations. You beat everybody, including nation states, in order to accumulate Bitcoin. So it's very, very big that we're seeing all of this play out. China and Russia are starting to see this. Putin and Xi Jinping, look at that. And we're seeing this global trade market of $33 trillion continue to grow. Now that we saw the tariffs implemented, Is there a way that, you get some indirect way, right? The US gets some sort of partner, right? Whether it's Mexico, Canada, whatever. But the US says, hey, Canada, don't trade with Russia. Canada, don't trade with China. Well, they'll try to block this and they'll do some indirect way just to avoid these sanctions or whatever it is. Well, how is Canada and all these other places going to accept payment? Makes you think there's going to be only one way, right? So as these geopolitical tensions continue to rise, I wouldn't be surprised if we hear more rumors like this. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear more from our boy Matthew Siegel over at Van Eck. He's already saying, look, Bolivia's doing that. French is doing that. French energy utility EDF is exploring whether it can mine Bitcoin with surplus electricity current exported to Germany. I mean, all of these things, right? They're going to be looking at as things increase in price. They're going to be looking at ways to increase their utilization of Bitcoin. Down Under Blues is saying he doesn't believe Bitcoin is a flight to safety yet. It is currently a risk on asset. That's interesting because, I mean, in the past, we're talking about a lot of moving parts here, right? We've seen Bitcoin Twitter claim that Bitcoin was decoupled literally 48 hours ago to saying now it's a risk on assets. So, we're going to see this decoupling start to happen. And I agree with you, Down Under Blues. I think we currently are a risk on asset. But like I said, I think that this is going to change and it's going to change here soon. So we are going to start to see more and more nation states. And in fact, the more nation states that start to utilize Bitcoin, the more nation states that start to, really use and hold Bitcoin, they're not going to be selling it. Maybe they start to transact in it, right? But they're not going to be trading Bitcoin necessarily. So the volatility, at least against the US dollar, is not really the volatility of Bitcoin, right? We know that Bitcoin is issuing a certain amount every single day, right? We know that the 6.125 Bitcoin every single day. We know that that's, being issued. And the amount, or every block, excuse me. We know that that is going to continue, right? And then we essentially know how much Bitcoin is coming out every single day. And we don't know how many US dollars, the global liquidity, all of these different human factors here, right? So as Down Under Blues is following up, it will happen. So I mean, we're seeing the global trade war really get meddled with Bitcoin. Can we actually believe what we're seeing here, folks? We are actually seeing Bitcoin being used as a differentiation factor and being used in international discussions. In fact, in geopolitical aspects. And the year 2025, the year of our Lord, we are seeing countries utilize Bitcoin to avoid sanctions that we saw that last year. Russia was doing that. And now we're seeing it to potentially avoid tariffs and halt the trade war. So there's a lot of interesting aspects going on here. I'm going to be discussing not only just the interesting aspects on Bitcoin, but how we are looking at that in the macro environment and how all of these different moves are changing on my Macro Insights channel. So why don't you guys hit the subscribe button here, hit the like button of this one, and then I will be doing a live stream in about 20 or 30 minutes or so on this channel. So why don't you guys join in on that? Hit the subscribe button over there as well. And thank you guys all for tuning in to another great live stream.